Thank you, thank you. Welcome to next week, everybody. I am Jeff Durbin. As you can see, things are getting very serious, and so let's talk about what's happening this week. You guys ready for it? Now, a female pastor of, get this, First Corinthian Baptist Church, she's pregnant, out of wedlock, and she refuses to step down from the pulpit. But her church is called First Corinthians. If you know anything about that city and that book, that makes sense. In an interview with Forbes magazine, Donald Trump challenged Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to an IQ test. There's no joke there. I'm just telling you that that's the President of the United States. That's who we have. A Baltimore school was actually evacuated due to an overabundance of pumpkin-spiced air freshener. The students hated it, saying that if there were a smell to hell, it would be pumpkin spice. A man in Minnesota lived in a house with the decomposing bodies of his mother and his twin brother. It was over 1 year before he reported their deaths to the authorities. The authorities asked him, wasn't the smell overpowering? He said, no, I just covered it with pumpkin spice air freshener. The king of Saudi Arabia announced that women are now finally allowed to drive. Right? Guys don't seem too excited about that. It makes sense, though. This came just a short time after he tried putting a woman in our White House. Yep, the brand new Star Wars trailer just came out for The Last Jedi, right? Came out yesterday. Or as Mike Pence called it, something else to walk out of. And speaking of this news, it is still on football thanks to Mike Pence. That's right, after the news of the national anthem protest started to die down, Mike Pence happened. He walked out of a football game this weekend when the players refused to stand. He was actually just going to get a hot dog, but once he realized that people thought he was leaving, he was all in. He was kind of an awkward situation. What do I guess I'm leaving, right? Instead of standing, some players were kneeling and some players were sitting. So, in protest, our vice president left the game, knelt down, got on his plane, and sat down. It was reported that his plane ride to and from the football game, get this, it cost the taxpayers of these United States $250,000. With that kind of money, he could have went to see Hamilton. All of this controversy, of course, started a year ago when Colin Kaepernick, how do you say this? Kaepernick, there you go. See, it shows you how much I know about this, right? When Kaepernick took a knee last season during the national anthem in protest to cops and racial violence. Since most of us don't actually know the lyrics to the national anthem, I thought we were kind of already protesting it. So, America was against the protest last year, and some even think that might even have to do with the factor of Colin being unemployed this season. So, if people were so against it last year, why is everybody for it now? Maybe it's because the left side cannot have the same opinion as Donald Trump. It's literally impossible for them. I wish President Trump would say everybody had to be vegan so that nobody would be vegan. And somebody would finally get rid of tofu. Please, Lord. Some football fans have sided with Donald Trump and started burning their season passes, whereas some have joined him on the protest. With the nation being divided on the subject, I thought that it'd be necessary to address the country about this issue. Kind of like how a president used to do, or at least used to do in more than 140 characters. Dear angry Americans, yes, President Trump has said some pretty bold things against kneeling during the national anthem, but relax. Trump is so old, he's just jealous of anybody else who can actually take a knee. Now, I'm with you when it comes to protesting against police brutality. Big time. It's a big problem. But let me ask you this. Have you thought this particular protest through? I mean, instead of standing for their national anthem, you're choosing to kneel. Now, I actually once knew a guy named Neil, and he didn't accomplish very much, so that's besides the point. I know those are two different things, but so is kneeling and police brutality. Taking a knee doesn't make unjust cops change their behavior. Taking a knee makes a girl change her behavior. Oh, you're proposing? I'm sorry for the mean things I said to you earlier. Now, if you want to protest police brutality, do something that correlates to police brutality. Example, play songs from the 70s band The Police and play it so loud that nobody can ignore it. Trust me, once everyone's ears are bleeding, we will all understand police brutality. Dad joke. Now, I get that there's a relation between cops and football. I do, and not always in the way that you would want. Over the years, cops have arrested players for domestic abuse, theft, and murder. And that's just O.J. Simpson. But we're not just talking about arrests. We're talking about unjust arrests, abuse, racial profiling, and murder. So does taking a knee really sound like the best answer? I mean, I can't tell you how many Christians go out to an abortion clinic and just take a knee. I mean, it really changes the hearts of murderers. Now, in fact, that's exactly how the movie It ended, right? All the kids are about to get eaten, and then Richie and Ben got down on one knee, and man, that clown just floated away. Now, of course, I'm just kidding. I think it was friendship that ended it. Now, I don't know, because that movie is just too freaky to watch, right? So, yes, look, here's the thing. I'm all for protesting. I really am. But why would you choose to do that against that issue during this unifying tradition? I mean, that's like going to your wedding and doing a protest for anti-rape in the middle of your vows. It's just not the time, guys. Now, I mean, sure, taking a knee gets people's attention. But now what? You know, even if every officer said, okay, look, we'll listen, what are you going to tell them? Because right now, nothing's changing. I mean, Colin has the ear of the nation, and yet he's not giving a coherent answer. Police brutality is a real thing that needs to be dealt with. I mean, it really does. And justice needs to happen. But, I mean, that's the issue. We're no longer having a meaningful standard of justice in this country. It used to be a biblical worldview, it was just in the atmosphere. We knew where to look for the answer. We go to the Bible, to God's perfect law. That's the answer. And so what are you going to answer with? I mean, look, you can't beat something with nothing. I mean, even the cops know that. But that's not what's happening right now, right? I mean, maybe aside from Joe Arpaio, nobody's on the side of cops abusing their power and racially profiling. So, I mean, give us an answer. I mean, tell us to contact our sheriff's department or show us how to get connected. I mean, let's get back to the meaningful standard of justice that Christians developed in the West as a form of establishing justice in a society. They went to the law of God. They all knew where to look. Whether you were a king, whether you were the regular person in the population, there was no question. It's in God's Word. It was in the atmosphere of what gave us our Bill of Rights. It's the start of our country. We need God's standards of justice in our nation, not nothing. We'll be right back, guys. Don't go away. Important show today. Talking about gun rights, self-defense. Don't miss it. Don't forget to like and share the episode right here on Next Week with Jeff Durbin. Be right back.
Enjoying the show? You can also enjoy Apologia All Access. For only $9.99 a month, you're able to get into shows, after shows, Apologia Academy, all sorts of amazing, great stuff. And you're going to want to log on. Like I said, it's only $9.99 a month. It's the same price as a cup of coffee. Wait, am I reading that right? A cup of coffee? There's no way that script is right. What? Who buys coffee for $9.99? Who's buying a $10 cup of coffee? This cup of coffee I stole from a man. There's a way that you can get around life without $10 for a cup of coffee. That doesn't make any... If you are spending $10 for your cup of coffee, you are spending the wrong amount of money in your life. Your whole life is disarray. You need to rethink your entire life. Trust me. Take that $10, like how much foam did you get on that cup of coffee? Take that $10, go use it just once for this month and get Apologia All Access. Then learn to buy a $5 cup of coffee. I think we're growing here. Apologia All Access. Right now. Sign up. Buy coffee a little better.
Welcome back, everybody. Live studio audience, welcome back to everybody watching right now across social media. This is Next Week with Jeff Durbin. I'm Jeff Durbin, and it is time for the delicious blend of the week, guys. This blend of the week is called iCoffee. It's actually created by Apple, and they say that it is revolutionary. That's what they claim, but it's actually just the same as all their old competitors' products. Except this one costs $1,000, so. All right, guys, let's do this. Welcome. Hello. Listen, guys, when something bad happens, people tend to blame the wrong thing. That's what we do a lot. Like when Taco Bell gets my order wrong and blames it on what I said I wanted. But I never said that I wanted a lukewarm taco, so. I mean, even when people are caught red-handed, they will still blame someone else. Kind of like this kid.
Noel, who drew on Mummy's mirror?
I don't know.
Was it you?
No.
Who was it?
It's Batman. It's Batman.
Batman did it.
It's Batman did it. It's
Batman. I mean, this kid expects us to believe that Batman broke into his house and put lipstick all over the mirror. That's ridiculous. He never would have used pink lipstick. It would have been black with a hint of justice. Besides, Batman only does that to my house by messing up my kids' bedrooms and convincing them not to do their chores. Pick your own kids, superhero kid. All right, when it comes to blaming the wrong thing, the biggest argument, of course, is gun control. And here's the thing, look, tragedies like Las Vegas last week leave everyone stunned, naturally. Of course, it's important that they do. And most people are blaming the guns, like these guys.
Some say it's too early to talk about gun control. For those victims last night, it's far too late.
Which you always say, now is not the time to talk about it. What you really mean is, there is never a time to talk about it.
We seem to do everything to avoid talking about guns.
Every late-night host blamed guns. And they even went so far as to beg their audience and viewers to revisit the Second Amendment. The Revisit, which, of course, is the unproduced sequel to M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit. It's where Grandpa's Second Amendment gets a visit from his grandkids, America, but the twist in this is this: they're not his grandkids. Or they are, but they don't want to be. I mean, people are going as far as saying that they want to ban the Second Amendment, you know, because it's not like our forefathers really prioritized the rights to gun. It's only the Second Amendment. They thought, hey, James Madison, what if you put something in there about guns just for fun? Don't worry, nobody will take it seriously. It'll be like anytime we mention God in the Declaration. They'll think it's a mistake. I mean, it's surprising that the media wants to see the Second Amendment taken away when it's so close to their precious First Amendment. I mean, if you want to ban the Second Amendment, can we question the First Amendment too? Can we start arresting CNN, late-night showrunners, and the host of The View? I mean, no matter what we do, can we please just get the host of The View to stop talking? At least that. Now, people keep talking about banning an amendment like it's nothing. But fun fact, kids, the first 10 amendments is the Bill of Rights, which means the government can't get rid of any of the amendments because they're not laws that the government grants to you. They're our rights. And when you try to deny us our rights, we'll treat you like Kevin Bacon in Footloose, and we'll still dance our little hearts out. You see, we were the only late-night show last week that didn't blame guns for the act of evil. So we're going to point out a couple of flaws from the late-night arguments. Let's start with Jim Jeffries, an Australian, who said this.
This is our reality now. America, you let this happen. I dare you to prove me wrong.
Dare you? Challenge accepted. Now, Jim Jeffries used the old strategy of blaming the people you're trying to convince. Now, when did Jim Jeffries become a mom? They're the only ones that do that best. I told you not to date him, Karen, and now he stole your car. You let this happen. Jim Jeffries, he blamed us, Americans, which he probably thought he could do since he's from Australia and has a delicious accent. Now, Australia has vocalized their gun laws, and they believe that they have the answer to the gun problem. Now, since they haven't had a mass shooting in 10 years. Now, before you get too excited, just know this. They haven't had a mass shooting because they don't have anything to shoot with. After a mass shooting in Australia killed over 20 people, the country changed their gun policies, taking away everyone's guns. And the only way you can own a gun is if you have a genuine reason for holding a firearm. And according to Australia, self-defense is not a genuine reason. Australia gives the gun ban the credit of their murder rate declining. But actually, there's no solid evidence that there's any correlation between the gun ban and the decline in violence. And our murder rate has declined as well in the U.S. On top of that, sexual assaults, robberies, and abductions, they reached a 7-year high, according to a study in 2015 and 2016. Abductions. Someone tell Liam Neeson his daughter's down there, and I guarantee you we'll get some people free. Australia has gotten so bad that a candidate running for office in Australia was even quoted as saying, "The people of Australia are afraid of walking the streets at night." Now, I, for one, am a little shocked that all this is going on in Australia. I mean, Outback Steakhouse has really mismarketed what happens down under. I thought everybody was just eating bloomin' onions all day and waiting for their steaks for an hour and a half. Apparently, I'm all wrong. I mean, look, not allowing guns for self-defense means your ability to defend yourself is that much harder. In actuality, studies show that guns are the most effective means of self-defense. I mean, if we were to get invaded by a country, they will use guns. And it doesn't matter how many action movies we've watched, our buffet-loving bodies are not Jackie Channing our way out of that situation. But look, let's get a little more specific. What if someone invades your home and your wife or your daughter is alone? Still don't want them to have a gun? I mean, if that's the case, leftists, you don't care about women. Women need an equalizer, something to defend themselves. Even Wonder Woman had a weapon. So the left side supports women in fights unless it comes to actual fights. And now you might be thinking, yeah, but when would a scenario happen where a woman needs to defend herself in her own home? Oh, I don't know. How about this one?
We're going to turn now to the young mom in Oklahoma who aimed her gun at an intruder while she was on the phone with 911. 18-year-old Sarah McKinley says the operator told her she couldn't shoot until the man broke into her home.
I wouldn't have done it, but it was my son. I'd protect him.
This young mother takes maternal instinct to a whole new level.
I walked over and got the 12 gauge. Went in the bedroom and got the pistol and put the bottle in his mouth, and then I called 911.
18-year-old Sarah McKinley killed a man, she says, to protect her 3-month-old baby.
I love how it says that she gets the gun and then she puts the bottle in the baby's mouth. I'll be right back. That's awesome. Now look, if it weren't for the right to bear arms, that woman wouldn't have been able to protect herself and her baby from 2 male intruders armed with a knife. Now, this video only leaves 2 questions. 1, why is gun control still up for discussion? And 2, why does the newscaster sound like a voice in a subway car? Stand behind the yellow line. Now, of course, you could say, yes, but she used a shotgun. Nobody needs a gun that shoots 30 rounds. Okay, I'll bite. Watch this.
And at about 2:30, a pair of home invaders tried the front and back doors, then broke a back window.
A young boy was protecting his sister. You know, he was in fear for his life and for his sister's life.
The brother grabbed his father's assault rifle and knew what to do with it.
That's exactly right. Now, if that kid only had a shotgun and missed, he could have been overpowered. AR-15s are easier to shoot. They're easier to control, especially for a woman, maybe has a smaller frame against a larger attacker. It's easier to control, and if you're a bad aim, you have many more shots. And if you have multiple attackers, it's the safest bet. Now, people think you only need a shotgun, but that strongly limits your defense. An AR-15 can help you hit your target, especially if you're trapped in an action movie. Because nobody hits the bad guy in the first several attempts. Everybody knows that. And for the people that say you don't need guns like sniper rifles, let me say this. Have you seen The Walking Dead? Have you? Snipers are great for killing hordes of zombies and very fun. Now, another point that the left ignores is why self-defense is needed. When we talk about self-defense, we're not just talking about protecting ourselves from criminals. We're talking about protecting ourselves from an out-of-control, tyrannical government. And that's why our founding fathers emphasized the right to bear arms. They believe that we should have the same weapons as the government that we've put in power, in case they go wrong because there's a bunch of sinners there and they try to overthrow us. But people keep saying this.
But to Congress, I would just like to say, are there no steps we can take as a nation to prevent gun violence?
So what then are we willing to do to combat pure evil? The answer can't be nothing. It can't.
We need to look to them to actually do something to prevent this from ever happening in the future.
We need to look to the government? No, we need to look to Jesus. That is the only answer. And listen here, James Corden, I'm not impressed with a British person telling us what to do with our guns. We've already had that debate, sir, and we won. Now, while we're on the subject of Great Britain, studies have proven that their gun ban was not effective in reducing homicides. In fact, the homicide rate went up and gun crime spiked 89%, all of which occurred after the gun ban. And yes, their gun crime is still lower than ours, but violent crime deaths without guns in England far outweigh ours in the US in many cases. So basically, they're okay with homicides as long as they mostly don't involve guns. We have a phrase for that out here, but it's called law and order, and nobody watches it anymore. It's not just Great Britain that holds similar results. In fact, China had a mass stabbing in which 29 people were left dead and 130 people were wounded. That's a mass stabbing. And before you assume anything, confuse leftists. There were no bullets in the knife. None. Now, more people die every year from hammers, fists, knives, blunt objects than they do from guns, which was coincidentally the name of an unpopular WWE wrestling duo. Hammer and fist over guns, fighting statistically. But let's say that we let the government take away our guns. That means that the gun holders will pretty much be the military and the cops. That should be safe, right, leftists? What about these cops? Now, warning, I have to warn you. These videos are very graphic. You might want to turn away or turn the sound down, and they never should have happened.
Okay.
Firearm
okay.
on me.
Don't reach for it then.
Don't
pull it out. Don't pull it out.
See, if you take away our guns, the only people that are armed will be the cops you can't trust, right, leftists? I mean, you're the ones protesting them constantly, and you want them to be the only people that are armed? I mean, you don't make any sense. That's like being in a fight and saying to the person you're fighting, hey, I don't really trust myself with this weapon. Will you hold it? You know, which ironically is what happened to the wrestling duo Hammer and Fist over guns. Now, officers abusing people because of their race is the whole reason football players are taking a knee during the national anthem. Either that or it's because the prices of food at the stadium are way too high. Now, some people are still confused as to why they're protesting. Look, consider this. Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, and Mao all took away guns before they took over the country, which is interesting if you think about it, because just like Hitler, the progressive leftists also want to get rid of guns and they want socialism. Get rid of the guns, National Socialism. I mean, they're one copy away from Mein Kampf from being Nazis. Now, as of now, you have the right to use your gun in this country in threatening situations. In fact, the Supreme Court even ruled in an instance that you can even use a gun in the event of an unlawful arrest. I mean, even Jesus, God, become man, spoke on this issue. And there are many references we can pull from in terms of self-defense and weapons in the Bible. But in Luke 11:21, Jesus said this: when a strong man is fully armed and guards his palace, his possessions are safe. Fully armed does not mean giving up your rifles and guns. It means keeping them. Take, for instance, the movie Red Dawn. A country invades the United States, and two high schoolers are able to defend themselves and survive because of guns. If they didn't have any guns, the movie would have been a lot quicker and a heck of a lot more boring. Except for the remake. nothing could have made that movie worse. Nothing. Now, it's easy to get caught up in fear over guns right after somebody's used them for evil, especially when everybody is using that fear to promote their agenda.
59 people are dead. Hundreds of people were wounded in what they say was the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history.
And they say that this was the worst in American history.
Last night was the biggest mass shooting in United States history.
Seriously, James Corden, you can't think of another mass shooting on American soil? Maybe something that was a little revolutionary? Convenient loss of memory for the redcoat there, right? Now, actually, it wasn't the biggest mass shooting in U.S. history. In 1921, over 300 people were killed when a white mob attacked the black residents of the community nicknamed Black Wall Street. The Wounded Knee Massacre in 1890, where hundreds of Native Americans were murdered when the government confiscated the tribe's guns and then shot and killed 300 people, including women and children. And of course, I'd like to add the Civil War, which killed 620,000 Americans. The left side is trying to make it seem like the misuse of guns is a new concept. But the misuse of anything that can harm others has been around for some time. People with wicked hearts will choose anything. I mean, look, it even works like this. Samson killed 1,000 people with the jawbone of an ass. Does that mean we shouldn't have ass bones in this country? Actually, if you do have that as a weapon, either something is wrong with you and you need help, or you're a prophet in beast mode. Now, even when people say, okay, fine, look, we should have guns, they also say that we need to regulate them better, like this.
It's so crazy. Right now, there are loopholes in the law that let people avoid background checks if they buy a gun privately from another party, if they buy a gun online or at a gun show.
Jimmy Kimmel seems to think background checks are the answer. But check this out. Just minutes before that statement, he also said this.
The guy was an accountant. He had no criminal record. His brother, who lives in Florida, seems totally shocked, genuinely dumbfounded. He said he saw no sign of any of this. The owner of the store that sold the killer some of the rifles said he passed the government-mandated background check.
Do you see the convoluted thinking? He blamed the background checks when he knew that it wouldn't have made a difference. And before you let Jimmy Kimmel lead your political conscience, remember this. He's actually from The Man Show. And like you said, Stephen Paddock went through all of the background checks, and he passed them all. No red flags popped up. When it comes down to it, stricter gun policies aren't the solution. I mean, all of these mass shootings take place in gun-free zones. Chicago has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. It's a paradise for the leftists. According to the Chicago Tribune, 3,000 people have been shot in Chicago this year. 530 people have died in Chicago in 2017. That's a place with some of the strictest gun laws that you can imagine. I mean, there were more murders in Chicago last month alone than in Las Vegas last week, which points to the core issue here. It's an issue of the heart. The Bible says the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And no matter what the rules are that you make, people with hearts that are far from God will make evil decisions. The real solution is to come back to God. We have fallen hearts. We need new hearts. And the Bible says in Ecclesiastes chapter 8 that when the sentence of justice is not executed speedily, the hearts of men are emboldened to do evil. Besides, if you really want to stop innocent people from dying, then ban the tool that's actually used to kill close to 1 million innocent lives a year in the United States. Here's what you're going to do. Type hashtag forceps control and help end the murder of babies in our country. Either that, or accept that the gun control argument is hypocritical and illogical, or give up your rights as an American citizen. Your pick. We'll be right back, guys. We have Larry Pratt with Gun Owners of America. Stay with us, guys, right here on Next Week with Jeff Durbin. Thank you guys very much. Welcome back, everybody, to Next Week with Jeff Durbin. I'm Jeff Durbin, and in light of the recent events, the tragedy in Las Vegas, we thought it'd be important to do a meaningful and relevant discussion on the issue of gun rights, gun ownership, the use of weapons, self-defense, the Second Amendment. And so we got a really important guest, and we think you'll really enjoy it. His name is Larry Pratt. He's the Executive Director Emeritus with Gun Owners of America. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you so much for giving us the time that you are today. Larry, we had another awful event happen in the United States. An evil man fired down indiscriminately upon a crowd at a concert. 59 people dead, over 500 people injured. I think it's important for people to hear from us as they pull on the heartstrings of America. As gun owners, how do we feel about the events that took place in Las Vegas?
Well, let's begin by noting that the Mandalay Hotel where the dirtbag was shooting from is a gun-free zone, quote unquote.
That's right.
And that's where 98% of our mass murders have taken place in the United States since 1950. You would think that we might start figuring something out, that maybe there's a correlation perhaps between gun-free and dirtbags committing mass murder. We still haven't got that memo. I really don't know what it's going to take, but I can tell you it's something that Gun Owners of America has been trying to do for quite some time. So perhaps this will be the final event that gets the point across that gun-free zones not only are not helpful, they're downright dangerous.
That's exactly right. I mean, you make a good point when you point to the fact that these mass shootings have taken place where people are disarmed and they have no ability to defend themselves against a murderer and a crazed person like this.
If I might add, I just learned today with a previous show that a security guard apparently had gone to the dirtbag's door before he began shooting. I don't know why he was there. He had knocked on the door and he got shot in the leg. He was totally unarmed. I've gone online, I've downloaded the Mandalay Hotel's rules and regulations for their security guards. Absolutely no weapons of any kind are permitted their security force. Some security.
Well, that's a tremendous mistake, obviously, and I think you keep pointing to something, you keep saying, and I agree with you keep calling him a dirtbag, and so you're responding to this, I think, with a heavy emphasis on the person rather than the weapon. And
yeah, and I think most Americans, unhappily, know the guy's name. I think that may have been part of his objective. I choose not to use the dirtbag's name. He's a dirtbag. He's the Mandalay Hotel dirtbag, as opposed to the San Bernardino dirtbag, or, you fill in the blanks.
That's right. That's right. And so your emphasis is on the person, the killer himself, and not the weapon. Larry,
evil is right here. It's not in my gun.
That's right. When you say right here, describe that, because I think that what a lot of the late night show hosts have done, what the major media has done, is they've tried to place the emphasis upon the tool itself, and they try to, I think giving excuses to the dirtbag, blaming issues of mental health issues, those sorts of things. They're trying to focus in upon the wrong thing. Why should we be focusing in upon a fallen human heart, sin, evil? Why should we be focusing in upon that rather than the tool itself?
Well, it's something that the liberal worldview in general, and certainly those that are anti-Second Amendment, tend to have, that they tend to look at the device as the critical element rather than the human heart. And they refuse to accept the notion that wickedness is in our hearts and that only but by the grace of God can that be controlled. It's certainly not going to be controlled by one or another gun laws. Let's go back to where we started. They had a gun-free zone in that hotel. That should have done it, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's important. Murder is already illegal. This is a gun-free zone, and so more legislation isn't going to stop wicked people from carrying out their wicked plans. You know, Larry, you work with Gun Owners of America, and your organization is promulgating the idea that gun ownership is a righteous thing, it's a good thing. My argument, Larry, would be that in light of events like this, we should be actually arming United States citizens, not focusing it upon more legislation. I think good guys and innocent law-abiding citizens should have weapons to defend themselves against evil people like this. I think that's the main thing we need to focus on.
Is a bill that's been before the Congress for too long. It's been held up by Speaker Ryan, who does not like it, but it's a measure that would let somebody, say in my state of Virginia, with a concealed carry permit, to go even to New York City or Chicago and carry a concealed firearm with the permit that they have in that state. We should get to the point where we are in about 15 states where there's no permit required whatsoever. You got a pulse, you can carry a gun. That's the way it ought to be. Certainly criminals don't get permits, so I think eventually maybe the legislators will get the memo. You know,
Larry, one of the things that shockingly is coming out of the mouths of, again, other late night hosts and liberal leadership, progressives, cultural Marxists, people like that, is they speak more towards now undoing the Second Amendment. It's not needed, Larry. We don't need it. It's something we should actually do away with. It's archaic. It's a part of a time long gone, and we need to rethink the Second Amendment. What's your first response when you hear people saying things like that?
Well, except that it usually doesn't have a British accent, although sometimes it does.
Yes.
It sounds like George III. This is the notion that elitists who believe that they're the ones born to rule and the rest of us were born to be ruled have had in their minds for so long, and they try to convince the rest of the population that you just leave the managing of guns and lethal force up to us. And of course, we know how that worked out. Blacks were denied their civil rights. Well, during slavery, it was illegal for them to have a gun. And after slavery was done away with, it was all but impossible because of various gun control laws for them to get guns. We know that this was what disarmed first Jews and then all Germans virtually in Hitler's Germany. It's what Lenin and Stalin did to disarm the population in Russia. It's something that Hugo Chavez did in Venezuela, where he disarmed the population and then slammed down his tyranny. It's a kind of a similar pattern throughout the world. Tyrants go after guns. And now, I should say, not every country that has virtually disarmed has resulted in tyranny, but it's certainly not correct that, for instance, a place like England is such a happy place. I'm in Fairfax County, Virginia. Fairfax County, Virginia is very urban. Don't believe me? Visit during rush hour, you'll find out.
Yeah.
We have a murder rate that is the same or lower than England's every year. Now, England has virtually no guns, and they have indeed a very low murder rate. We're gunned up. You can own a machine gun here in Fairfax County. We have the same murder rate they have in England. I don't think ownership of guns bears on crime being committed.
Right. Right. So I got three main questions I want to focus on with you, and let's start with the first one. The Second Amendment. People say things like needs to be rethought. It needs to be even. They've said Bill Maher has said it's bull. You know what, and it needs to be done away with. Second Amendment, tell us, Larry, what does it say? The argument is often made by people who want to undo it, that it has to do with a well-organized militia. It isn't about citizens owning guns. Could you speak to that?
Well, they're right. It's about a well-organized militia. What they're apparently maybe truly unaware of, because our schools have been rather deficient in this area, that the militia was considered to, by law, a federal law enacted the same year that the Bill of Rights was finally ratified, including the Second Amendment. all men in the United States, and now it would be all persons, between certain ages. I think at the time it was 17 and 44, but you get the idea. All people had to have a military rifle, had to have a long gun, and that law was repeated more than once at the federal level. So the founders were interested in having an armed populace, and they actually were requiring people to own guns. I don't think that's the kind of gun control that people like Bill Maher are talking about. So maybe Bill Maher should take a look at his own opinions and decide where the bull something is.
Right. So the argument is also made in terms of the Second Amendment that at the time we're talking about muskets. We're talking about a weapon that takes time to load. It's not something that carries 30 bullets in a magazine. And so, you know, the argument today that people are allowed to have weapons that fire this many rounds, you know, it just doesn't make sense. It's not consistent. I would actually argue that the reason for the Second Amendment was we needed to be able to even fight against a tyrannical government, which would say that we need to have the same kind of weapon, the gun, that the military has.
That's exactly what a look at our history does show. The spark, if you will, that led to the War for Independence was the Battle at Lexington, which followed a number of previously successful efforts by British soldiers to steal colonial ammunition from magazines that were maintained by the municipalities. And when they got to Lexington and tried the same stunt, they were met by a rather ragtag group, kind of ineffective at the moment, but they were held off at Concord Bridge and they were sent packing. And they lost about a quarter of their detachment. Quite a few men, scores of men, died. British soldiers died because the colonists kept hiding behind rocks and fences and barns, shooting at them as they retreated back to Boston. That's what the Second Amendment is all about. It's to protect the people's ability to protect themselves from a government should the government go off the rails. And I would submit that our government, while it's once in a while looked like it might be going off the rails, has ultimately been kept from doing that by an armed populace. Perhaps the most obvious example of that was in Athens, Tennessee in 1946, right after the Second World War. Returning veterans were appalled to find that they'd been risking their skins abroad fighting tyranny when right at home, literally the ballot boxes were being stolen by the corruptocrats running Athens, Tennessee. And when they saw that was happening, they formed a very quick militia, rode into town on their tractors and their pickup trucks, and there was a brief gunfight, and the cops who had stolen the ballot boxes, violating the state law that you had to leave the boxes in place until all the votes had been counted, the cops decided, well, this is not going to end well for them. They were outgunned, they left the ballot boxes, they fled, and it turned out, surprise, that the reform slate had actually won the election. That's the Second Amendment in action. It was working exactly as it was intended to work.
That's fantastic. Okay, so 60 seconds here, quick end, and then we're going to continue the conversation over at apologiastudios.com and extend this discussion a little longer. But in about 60 seconds here, I think one of the major jabs against our position, Larry, people will say, well, you don't want to do anything. You really just don't care about the people that are dying. You're cold-hearted, so you don't really have an answer. You just say, do nothing. Well, Larry, as the Executive Director Emeritus from Gun Owners of America, what's your solution to something like Las Vegas?
Well, you want to get rid of the gun laws that are on the books. Look at Chicago. They've got almost every single gun law that every anti-Second Amendment type has ever dreamed of. And for their trouble, they lose many more people than were killed in Las Vegas every year. Maybe 10 times the number of people are murdered with gunfire in Chicago than died in Las Vegas. Gun control is a big, fat flop. And the way to stop this carnage is to get rid of gun control so that the average guy and gal can defend themselves so that they're not just being left to the not very tender mercies of the criminal class.
How can people get a hold of you? How can they support Gun Owners of America?
Well, go to gunowners.org, and for free you can sign up for the email alerts that we put out. And the reason for that, not only is it information, but also it makes it very easy to fire off your own email. If you like what we've written, pre-written email to your own member of Congress, so that they realize that what they're thinking about doing is either a good idea or a bad idea, depending on what it might happen to be. They're fixing to come after the bump fire stock that was used by the dirtbag in Las Vegas. It's not a particularly effective device, in my opinion, but we know from what Nancy Pelosi has said that if they get started banning that, that's not going to stop. They're going to try to make that the beginning of the slippery slope. So I think it's incumbent upon us, if we believe that the Second Amendment is to restrain the government has no business telling us with what means we might use to restrain them. That doesn't seem to be very logical.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Pratt, Executive Director Emeritus, Gun Owners of America. We're done with this segment here for now. Go to apologiastudios.com to get more. Thank you guys. Be right back. Stay with us. All right, everybody. Again, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for sharing. As you all know, the heartbeat of this show is end abortion now. There's so much to say, and we're excited about what the future holds. 250 churches across the United States right now are connected at End Abortion Now and are on mission together under the banner of End Abortion Now to bring the gospel into conflict with our culture, to bring the good news, and to offer help at the abortion mills. And we get notifications constantly, really constantly, of lives being saved at local abortion mills. And it's powerful. I mean, in Flint, Michigan, they are averaging, several saves a week, it seems, right now. We have churches across the nation that send us notifications that they saved a life. They're caring for mothers and for fathers who were thinking about going in to kill their children. Go to endabortionnow.com. You guys can get connected with your local church, and you can join with Christians across the United States who are focusing in upon not legislation that works simply to sort of chip away at this monstrosity, but working towards the criminalization of abortion in our nation, the abolition of abortion in our nation, the full end of abortion in our nation. That's what we're doing, and the heartbeat of it all is to stand consistently on Christians on the Word of God. You guys can go to endabortionnow.com like Christians have before you. You can get free training, you can get the free resources, and you can join us as we work together to have a consistent Christian, gospel-saturated message to end abortion in our nation. So go check it out today, and don't forget to like and share this episode. Make sure you let everybody know. We'll catch you guys next week right here on Next Week with Jeff Durbin. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you guys very, very much. God bless you. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you very much.